a roll call, please?
Mayor White?
Here.
Deputy Mayor Lowry?
Here.
Councilmember Siller?
Here.
Councilmember Curran?
Here.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Here.
We'll have our invocation led by Steve Chappell from Coastline Baptist Church.
Let's pray. Our Father, we are so thankful to live in this land with the freedoms that come from you. We are grateful for those who fought to protect and to preserve. And Lord, we're grateful to live in this community. What a blessing it is to raise our families here and live our lives. We thank you for those first responders who protect us, and we pray your hand of safety on them. And Lord, in this chamber tonight, we pray that you bless these leaders that you've given to our city. Give them wisdom and discernment and insight. God, we pray that your hand of protection would be on them in every way. Lord, I pray that in all things our lives would be honoring to you. And we ask this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
Jack, would you like to lead us in the pledge?
Ready? Begin.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
At this time, I'd like to have Elkie Wills from the Humane Society join us with Della.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for having us. Here we have Della. She is a little nervous, but she did come from a wonderful home where she was greatly loved. They were just in the middle of some transitioning and aren't able to keep her. She was around small children. She was house trained. She loves to go to parks and loves to go running. She likes smaller dogs, doesn't really appreciate those dogs that are bigger than her. As you can see, she's a little nervous at first, but once she becomes comfortable, she's a big snuggle bug. And she is 7 years old, which means her adoption fee is just $25, which includes her spay, her vaccinations, her microchip, a free bag of food, and so on and so on. She's available for adoption. We are open from 10 to 6 for adoption 7 days a week unless there's some special holidays. And just a reminder, like her family, they couldn't take advantage of this program, but other people who are struggling financially are invited to look at our PAWS program. They are there with a food bank resource to help you with vaccines, to help you get your animals spayed or neutered. If you're struggling with housing, they can give you the right, point you in the right direction. They also go out and help our homeless individuals with their animals. So it's a great resource for people and pets that are struggling. So share that with your friends and family. Thank you.
Thank you. Can she be a police dog? Closed session report, Mr. Mullen.
Thank you. The council met in closed session to discuss item 1 on the agenda, conference with labor negotiator involving the Oceanside Police Management Association. There's no action on that item to report under the Brown Act. Council also met on 2 litigation matters, one significant exposure to litigation, and the action entitled Martin Moravi versus City of Oceanside Workers' Compensation, case number ADJ 995-1895. Again, no action to report under the Brown Act on either of those 2 items. Finally, the council met on item 3, conference with real property negotiator involving the 4.88-acre portion of the El Cor zone property. Negotiating parties, City of Oceanside and Sterling Development. Negotiator for the city, Douglas Edow, and the real estate manager. Under negotiations are price and terms for the potential sale of the property, and there is no action under the Brown Act to report on item 3 as well.
Next, we have our consent calendar, items 5 through 13. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I believe there are some that have been pulled.
Yes. Items 7, 9, 10 have been pulled, and item 8 with modification for the city clerk to accept the easement deed.
Move approval for balance.
Second. Please vote.
No. You have to move it to.
consent calendar has been approved, 5-0.
Item 7, do you know who pulled that?
Yes. Cindy Rocco.
Honorable Mayor, council members, this is just really quick. I've been having a trend of sort of looking at where our costs are occurring and our revenues, and I just wanted to make a request that in the future that we explore other alternatives to monitor and provide information on our short-term rentals so that we can collect our TOTs and verify compliance. Right now, this gentleman in Canada actually created an incredible niche market to go in there and to do this for governments. But in my brief research is that I looked up on Airbnb because I was looking for other governments and how they manage this process. And Airbnb actually provides the service free of charge. So I knew this service is going to monitor over 15 short-term rental locations, and I just feel like in the future, if there was a way to explore using the companies themselves to provide those services. Again, I don't know what percentage of the additional contract of a total of $100,000 that would equivocate to, but I'd just like us to be open into the future to explore the companies themselves, because I'm sure that they will start creating and providing that niche. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Ms. Rocco. Move approval.
Please vote.
Item has been approved. The next item is item number 9, and the speaker is Joanne Brown.
Joan Brown, 511 Rockledge Street, Oceanside. I'm just going to give my last 2 cents worth on the condos I'm buying. And I feel that if there's not any embellishment on that corner, it's not going to do very well. The person that bought Fresh and Easy is not taking care of their landscaping, so it's dying. It's not being watered. And I feel that with everything that is there now, those condos won't do well, and they'll be bought by investors, and they'll be charged large rents for them, unless we do some embellishments there, like putting some landscaping, like we have done on east of the freeway, south on Oceanside Boulevard. I mean, I remember the day when you spent $250,000 on that study we did for Oceanside Boulevard around that area, but that nothing came to that. So if you could plant that on that side of the Oceanside, it would very much fix that whole area up. And that's the way I feel about it. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you. This is a project that's already been approved, and what's before us is approval of the final map, which is considered a ministerial act by the council. It's not unfortunately we can't talk about the project again. If there are requirements by the owner to maintain the property, and they're failing to maintain the property, that would be a request to the city for a code enforcement violation. I don't know what is required, so I'm not sure if there is a code enforcement violation here. But this project, initially I did vote against it. I thought that there were issues for me regarding the traffic and the number of units, the density of and also the circulation. And I felt that there were significant impacts by this project. However, this is the final map and recordation of that. So I'm not going to be able to vote against it, but I was very much against this project. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passed 5-0. The next item is, that has been pulled, is item number 10 by Cindy Rocco.
Honorable Mayor, council members, this will just be really fast. I'll just keep reading the reports. And I wanted to see, this has to do with the Smart Growth Incentive and the ATP related to creating the bridge across Loma Alta Creek and continuing the bike rail from Morse to Oceanside Boulevard. And well, first of all, I applaud the staff on how many grants they've been obtaining, et cetera, and I want to make sure that this grant marries in with our environmental officer taking charge of the other grant for the Loma Alta Creek restoration. And my concern is I'd like to have make a request to include as a part of the EIR process, to include the study alternative analysis on having the bike trail completed on the east side of the tracks along the train tracks. And that way it would be from changing the scope from Cassidy Street, where the current tracks end on the west side, and then just continuing it from Cassidy to Oceanside Boulevard to make it safer travel for children, especially in lieu of our recent events. And this way kids do not have to cross the tracks twice. So the vulnerability at Cassidy Crossing and at Oceanside Boulevard. And that's it primarily from a safety perspective. So if we could include in the alternative on the EIR of Cassidy Street to Oceanside Boulevard on the east side of the tracks. Thank you.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you. Is there a staff on this item? Thank you. I did get a chance to speak with Ms. Rocco just before the meeting regarding this item and her suggestions about the EIR. This is an application for funds, for grant funds, which we always appreciate staff pursuing. Thank you very much for doing that. This is for to be able to do an environmental impact report, the study, and studies generally include an alternatives analysis. So will staff be looking at that alternatives analysis?
Mayor, council members, Kyle Cover, Public Works Director. That is correct, Ms. Sanchez.
Okay, and I understand at this time you're in the process of a scoping meeting. Is that right, for the project?
That's correct. We've been looking at alternatives to complete this section of the trail. It's the last major section of the trail that needs to be completed.
Right, and we very much have wanted to make this happen, make this connection actually finally happen for our coastal rail trail. Do you have an idea of when the public will be invited to add to the scoping meeting or have some kind of input to the scoping on the project?
I don't. This item before you tonight is just applying for a grant that's due within a week. Once we'll know within a couple of months whether we get the grant or not, and then we can kind of move forward. So we're still a little early in the process.
Okay, so if we do not get the grant, then we won't be moving forward.
We would probably look at other funding options to move forward, but this is the best chance we have right now.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
Item 14, an exclusive negotiating agreement between the city and Rancho Del Oro Oceanside Partners for the development of a resort hotel on a portion of El Corazon.
Excuse me. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, Douglas et al., Real Estate Manager, City of Oceanside. I guess we're not reading the synopsis, so I will jump right in. This is an exclusive negotiating agreement with Rancho Del Oro Oceanside Partners. It's for an agreement to move forward to perform due diligence analysis by the developer, Rancho Del Oro Partners, to see if they can build a 300-plus room resort-style hotel at El Corazon. A little history on the matter is that in 2013, the city entered into a disposition and development agreement with Sudbury Development, and Sudbury was allowed to do development at El Corazon on the commercial portions, the hotel portions, and also on the Parks and Rec portion. They did reserve a right of first refusal that I'll explain in a minute. In late 2017, RDO Partners submitted a proposal to the city to develop this hotel on the recreational portion of El Corazon. The primary reason for the exclusive negotiating agreement is to give assurances to the developer that we're not going to go out and talk to another developer about building a hotel in the similar area. The pertinent terms of the E&A are that the development is going to be on the Parks and Rec portion of the El Corazon property. Where there is an inconsistency with the specific plan, the developer will be required to get an amendment to the specific plan. The term of the E&A is for 2 years. The E&A allows the city and developer to negotiate a DDA should the developer proceed after their due diligence, which will be brought before the council for their approval. And the developer is also requesting that the city obtain a waiver of the right of first refusal. The city has a right to develop projects on the Parks and Rec portion, but Sudbury retained the right to, again, step into the shoes of the developer, which is the right of first refusal. So the developer is asking for a waiver of that. So that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Is there any public?
Yeah, the first speaker is Ken Hacker, and the second speaker is Pat McFarlane.
Ken? Ken?
Sorry about that. I was listening to Doug and I forgot that I was up. First of all, I oppose this hotel for several reasons. Mr. Endow wasn't part of the original El Corazon committee, but he was involved with it for the 8 years that I was on the committee, the original committee and the second committee. I'm wondering if the city staff has even looked at the specific plan since it was approved by the majority of the city council. There's 2 hotels areas in the specific plan, and you can see them up there on the site. Way on top and one to the right. The one on the right is the one which belongs to Sterling, which if they're going to put a hotel in there, they should talk to Sterling, not take the parkland. You're taking away many of the fields that are designed for the parkland. Anyway, as I've indicated, I disagree with the city council giving a outside company permission to look at the taking parkland for a hotel when there are 2 specific areas in the specific plan for the hotel. This company is located in Thousand Oaks, even though they show it as the Rancho de la Ora Partners. They're located in Thousand Oaks, California, and I lived up in Thousand Oaks area for 25 years before I moved down here 20 years ago. Anyway, I request that you vote no on this petition. Thank you.
Pat McFarlane.
Hello, my name is Pat McFarlane. I'm on the board of Friends of El Corazon, and I am representing El Corazon today. In addition to that, I'm representing myself personally because I live off of Mesa Drive, off of El Camino Real, and I'm well aware of the constant traffic problems we have there. And so when you're talking about making changes that affect the area, you're talking about things that will affect me and my neighbors, and of course I'm concerned about that, as well as what the board is trying to do. The statement from the board is, Friends of El Corazon look forward to reviewing the development plans for any new development as the project is submitted to the city and during the extensive review process. FELC is committed to maintaining the guidelines of the specific plan for El Corazon as a whole and for each project as it relates to the rest of the park. And this is something that's very important, not only for now, but for the future. And we do need parks and space for our citizens who live here. Thank you.
That's it.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Well, that's all the speakers?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. El Corazon Park has been either a vision or an actual plan for the last 20 years. 20 years we have been working as a community, and this is very, very broad agreement. And as you know, in Oceanside, that doesn't happen very often. The agreement was that this would be a park. It's 500 acres, but less than half can something be developed. And the plan that we put together, which was done by a committee and was agreed 5-0 by the council, was a very specific plan with very specific items on it, including a hotel, but not on parts that would be parkland, not on parts that would have fields. I am concerned about this because where we would hope to have a hotel, we're not hearing about a hotel, even though we've been urging a hotel. We're coming back with something completely different. And where we want our playing fields, and there's less and less land at El Corazon for those kind of activities, we're hearing construction. And I don't believe that that is what the intent has been for the last 20 years. I believe that we have a very specific plan that we continuously are trying to change. And that is not good planning. That is not a good idea, and I will be voting against this. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lowry.
Thank you, Mayor. This is public land. It's a park. We already have laws in place about that in addition to the specific plan. I've always supported keeping public land, open space, parkland available to public use, and that does not include building a hotel on it, although there is a hotel allowed in a certain part of the contract that is in place already. So I oppose this item also. Thank you.
Councilmember Kern?
I want to move that we actually approve it and let staff negotiate the agreement with the partners. This is a negotiation agreement. We don't know what the plans are going to be until we get all the way to the end of the process. All this is guaranteeing them the exclusive right to negotiate with staff. There's no project here yet. This is a negotiation. So I'm going to let staff run forward and negotiate with and give the exclusive negotiating agreement with Oceanside Partners, LLC. Thank you.
Councilmember Feller?
Doug, could you put the map back up, please? You're talking about the very top there, the purple at the very top. Is that the one you're referring to?
Honorable Mayor, Councilmember Feller, Doug, and our real estate manager. Yes, where you see the two purple blobs up there, it's
right.
The one furthest to the top or to the north. Just to the west of that is the area that they're looking at.
And it seems to me in our in all the plans that we've ever reviewed, there's always been a hotel planned up in that area. Is that correct?
Councilmember Feller, yes, the hotel by Sudbury is still planned for the purple blob that's closest to the top. This is an additional hotel to the west of that. The hotel site that is furthest to the east or the right is not a viable hotel site due to the geotechnical constraints, and most likely you'll never see a hotel there.
But the other site was initially on the site for a hotel.
It still is.
It still is. So that's actually pretty simple. We're not changing anything other than just asking you to negotiate with staff. Is that correct?
At this time, all we're asking is to negotiate with the developer.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other speakers?
We were all waiting with bated breath.
Well, let me turn my microphone on so I can second it.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion passes 4-1.
I meant no.
3-0.
3-2.
I mean, sorry, 3-2.
Do you have speakers under item 19?
Yes. Yes, we do.
And how many are there?
Quite a few. 7. Do you want to start? We have Joe Corbett and Ken Rundle.
Come on, we're doing 19.
Is it Joe Corbett, I heard?
Yep.
Okay. Honorable Mayor, fellow council members, thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm Joe Corbett. I'm the Vice President of Wannesview Homeowners Association, speaking on behalf of our 299 homeowners. I came to speak about the rising problems with crime and transients in the airport neighborhood. While tonight I'm speaking on behalf of our HOA, I'm also carrying the concerns of other neighborhoods along the San Luis Rey River, and many of those neighbors have reached out to me directly through social media. Over the past 4 years, the airport neighborhood and surrounding homes have become increasingly overrun with transients, as well as a marked and continual increase in crimes such as assaults, property thefts, break-ins, vandalism, graffiti. Our residents have grown tired of crime and having surrounding areas populated and destroyed by transients, as well as contending with the other issues that they follow with them. We cannot do any more than we already are, and the problem is worsening. Recently, on the February 8th of last month, a fire was started at the riverbed, the intersection of Benet and Highway 76. Fire is one of many enormous concerns that are a threat to us. In some cases, some transient camps are less than 100 yards from our homes. It's our contention that the seemingly unchecked growth of transients now freely camping in the riverhead and its proximity to our homes, totally unacceptable threat to our safety and our quality of life. Transients ignore the city's no trespassing ordinance, signs, cut fences, fell trees, destroy habitat, and any areas they're permitted to establish themselves. We feel it's time for the city to take some meaningful, effective steps to deny transient populations from dwelling in the riverbed, or we risk what happened in Santa Ana. The Orange County Register reported on the 9th of this month that they pulled out 404 tons of debris, 13,950 needles, 5,279 pounds of hazardous waste. That includes human waste, aerosols, propane, pesticides, and other materials. Yesterday, I delivered a 16-page detailed document to the city, which presents our issues, include what we feel are feasible recommendations for near-term solutions, presents statistical facts that validate our concerns, and further provides detailed information into problem areas. The goals are to work with the city to reduce crime in the airport neighborhood, make our homes and nearby communities safer from threats of fire, drugs, rising crime, gangs, and other nefarious activities. We want to urge the city to take immediate action to deny transients from camping in the riverbed and near our homes by enforcing the established no trespassing ordinance. We want to preserve our property values. We want to preserve the river habitat, its coastal estuaries, and the security of the bike trail. I came here to raise awareness of our concerns, not to cast blame. Once I think you have a chance to look at the document, I make a couple of I think are feasible recommendations from our community. Just like you, I'm an elected member of an organization, and I have a duty to my constituents to present their issues, and I'm presenting them to you. I'm done. We have concerns for people that are vulnerable and underserved, and we address some of those ways we might be able to help them through community volunteerism and activism. We feel that inaction into this issue will now inevitably cost us more later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kent Rundle.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, thank you for this opportunity. My name is Kent Rundle. I was born and raised in San Diego. I've been a resident here for the last 50 years. I'm a fire captain for local Orange County Fire Department, and I'd like to jump right into it, address the issue of homeless encampments along the San Luis Rey River Bike Trail. As I'm sure you're all aware, if you're not, you should be. There's a code in place along this trail that's not always being enforced. It's quickly becoming a big concern of our residents in Oceanside, and I'm going to briefly go over some of the concerns. Aside from what Mr. Corbett just mentioned, I've worked in Orange County for the last 13 years. My first in district, I'm responsible for the district along the Santa Ana River Bike Trail, which is basically from Interstate 5 north of Angel Stadium. There's always been several homeless encampments there whose occupants I actually got to know pretty well and acquainted with them. In the past 18 months, I watched 10 encampments turn into over 1,000 people living along that riverbed. As a result, police and fire calls have gone up 30% due to documented calls related to these encampments. A recent cleanup of this bike trail revealed staggering statistics, which printed in the OC Register: 404 tons of debris, 13,000 syringes, over 5,000 pounds of human waste. They're going to have to grade the top layer of dirt as well off the trail to dispose of this waste at a hazardous waste site. This was picked up off a public bike trail that is there for families to use. Playgrounds are surrounded by this, and signs are posted just like our river trail: no camping or trespassing. I'm not here to point fingers or throw up my hands. I'm here to do as I do on my daily job, and that's to help. I'm not an expert on this, but I'm around this every day, helping and dealing with the results every single day I work. Not a day goes by where I'm not responding to the Santa Ana riverbed for a 911 call as a result of these encampments. I respond to homicide, drug overdose, assault, fire, public indecency, rape, and it's a drop of what's happening not far from our city and our encampments we have here on our riverbed. I've been to several city council meetings in Orange County that have erupted in city council members publicly arguing with each other on this issue. I've been to a council meeting where a council member in Orange County who is an avid cyclist stated he will no longer ride that bike trail because of fear. He, by the way, found a live .38 caliber round on the ground. I've heard the city council in Orange County also state that they'd do it over again. If they could do it over again, they would have handled it differently. All of this I'm speaking about is in simplest form the result of codes that aren't being enforced. Our own police department here in Oceanside even states on their website, enforcement is through non-enforcement. I don't have the answers to this, but what I can absolutely tell you 100% is what doesn't work, and that is non-enforcement. I love the city. I hope you take my comments to heart and take a proactive stance on this. Thank you.
The next speaker is Diane Trader.
Start the clock.
It's me again, Diane Strader. I'm from the East Side. First of all, I have an announcement. March 27th at 6 p.m. at the Country Club Senior Center is the Parks and Recreation Master Plan follow-up. It'll be the second meeting of that, and I would love to have as many people from the city of Oceanside go to that, have input into it. That's off my schedule here. Just wanted to make that announcement. Mr. Mayor and Oceanside Council members, thank you for providing the residents of Oceanside an opportunity to share their concerns at these meetings. Tonight I would say that I understand that there's going to be digital billboards raising its ugly head again. Site pollution, by the way, is just as disturbing as noise and air pollution. It is said a picture is worth 1,000 words. As you can see, whether it is paper signage or digital signage, it gets in the way of some of the beauty in which we are growing accustomed to and which we are surrounded by. I would like to make the mention that there is no guarantee that whatever signage that you approve will be just that signage. You can see how it can get out of hand. Policy and ordinances can change in a flip of a vote, and we've seen that happen in this council. So please keep the digital signage out of Oceanside. Thank you.
And the next speaker is Harriet Vigbert.
Thank you.
Honorable Mayor, City Council members, I'm Harriet Wickberg. I live at 818 North Strand. I'm a 42-year property owner and resident of Oceanside. It's been quite a while since I've been here. It's been over 2 months since I first approached the issue of parking meter permits with some of you, and now time is running out on the issue. A little history. In 1991, the city was in the middle of a mean, bitter, and litigious, challenging recall to oust a city council member. I am well versed in the issue because I lived it. October 31st, 1991, the recall election was held and defeated. Then exactly 13 days later, that same council member led a resolution to install parking meters covering the area in which many recall supporters lived, as well as off-street parking for the Strand. We currently have no parking sign on our entire Strand, therefore the parking on Pacific Street was very important to us. It could be assumed an uproar occurred because exactly 1 week later, an ordinance passed creating a pay-for-cross parking permit. That was fine, but little did we know in adopting the criteria for the Public Services Director to follow, the South Strand was added and the North Strand was not. Recall payback? Perhaps. Who knows? Sure seems suspicious, maybe. However, over the last 26 years, and I repeat, last 26 years, the Strand received these permits. Maybe a wrong was being made right towards the North Strand. Now the somewhat sketchy part. Someone has decided to audit the old ordinance, this 26-year-old ordinance, and it has been, and now this North Strand is no longer parking permit eligible. Are we auditing 26-year-old ordinances? The program is flawed. Requirements different than the ordinance. Decals are being given to residents when the ordinance says they are to be decals, or being given hangers instead of decals. Everyone receiving hangers that are only good this year till the end of March are still paying the $10. This whole thing is a mess and needs to be corrected or discontinued. Messes need solutions. Continue the passes to the North and South Strand with some sort of a stay till this whole thing can be worked out. Or, this is not a very good solution, take down all the no parking on the Strand and let us park in front of our places, just like you have the privilege to do in your neighborhood. We have until April 1st to do something to correct the injustice and tell me why we shouldn't feel discriminated against. Esther, Chuck, you are both in District 1, and this is where it's happening. Thank you.
The next speaker is Dennis Martinek.
Great. Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm a supporter, Dennis Martinek, 1537 Sleeping Indian Road in Oceanside. I'm a supporter of SOAR, and tonight I want to announce the first success of our grassroots effort to save open space and agricultural resources. Thanks to all the dedicated volunteers that we have garnered over the last few months, who have spoken to thousands of voters, we have delivered over 13,000 signatures to the city clerk on Monday. Those will be or have been delivered, I understand, to the registrar. The people we spoke to were strongly in support. We've spoken to thousands of voters. They're strongly in support of giving citizens the right to vote on changes to the general plan when it relates to open space, which will be parks, habitat areas, and the like, and agriculture. The agricultural lands are almost gone. We have the small area of Morrill Hills, and would like to preserve it. It doesn't involve taking any land. It involves preserving agricultural land. It would allow the farmers to do whatever they want within the agricultural constraints of that land. The open space speaks for itself. Preserving parks is a noble thing. We need parks. They're a resource and would like to preserve them. We look forward to the San Diego Registrar of Voters validating our signatures and the election in November. The Oceanside SOAR movement, the initiative, does give Oceanside voters the right to vote. It does preserve farmland, parks, and open space. It also minimizes sprawl, reduces greenhouse gases, and reduces infrastructure costs. And it supports Oceanside agritourism. We support the farmers in our area. We want them to have the flexibility to run their businesses financially successful. So thank you very much. And again, thank you to all the volunteers who have helped in this effort in gathering the 13,000 plus signatures.
The next speaker is Kelly McCormick.
Good evening, I'm Kelly McCormick, and I'm here to speak in support of the Public Safety Commission recommendation against allowing commercial marijuana businesses in Oceanside, and in support of the police chief and the fire chief, both of whom also raised serious concerns about the ad hoc committee recommendations. I urge you to take their input seriously. The Economic Development Committee also stated that it's important to be mindful of the city's reputation. Studies from other states show that legal pot increases the black market by making the product more available and by allowing the illegal operators to hide in plain sight. The California Food and Agriculture Department has reported that California is already an outsized producer of black market pot for the rest of the country, with more than 4/5 of the 13.5 million pounds grown here ending up in other states. Why would you want to add to that glut? Many in the Medipot business will say that their potential customers need access, but I'd like to remind you that Medipot patients and caregivers already are allowed to exchange and transport pot. That is not in question. I would also like to share something they're not going to tell you. Right now, California has no regulations for testing marijuana. An NBC investigative report recently told the story of Todd Gullion, an Orange County man who decided to try Medipot for his back pain. Instead, he ended up in the emergency room with serious neurological symptoms. Despite assurances from the pot shop that his pot cartridge was pesticide-free, testing revealed that it contained 355 times the amount of pesticides allowed in some of the other states that actually have regulations on this. 44 other samples from multiple pot shops also were tested, and 93% of them tested positive, including pesticides that become far more dangerous when heated or burned. If we truly care about patient safety, let's make sure they have this information. Support public safety by upholding the ban on cultivation, manufacturing, and pot shops. Thank you.
The next speaker is Dave Newman.
Good evening. Dave Newman, Fire Mountain. Opponents of medical marijuana continue the ancient argument of keeping marijuana out of our city in order to protect our children, while conveniently leaving out that the fact that marijuana is already in our city and our neighborhoods, as marijuana is the most commonly used illicit drug according to the National Survey on Drug Use and Health, citing 22.2 million people used it in the last month. Why these opponents of regulations feel it's safer to keep a black market thriving in our city, selling untested marijuana to anyone with cash, is as odd and upsetting to me as their unfounded and baseless assertions that any excess legal marijuana will be funneled into the illicit black market, including those outside of our state. It's preposterous to assume a business that spent years and millions of dollars to be state licensed would even risk that. And until that scenario actually happens, it would be immoral to pretend to know the future of an industry you know nothing about. Perhaps we should be upset that opponents of regulations are contributing to our ever-growing black market currently selling in our neighborhoods to our children in an unsafe, unregulated manner. We hear about how easy it is for a child to walk into a regulated dispensary and purchase marijuana. Yet we never seem to hear about these brazen children in the news. I, for one, would love to meet the child who has been able to accomplish this feat of entering a licensed dispensary, plopping down his cash, and walking out with a product of any kind. You might be able to get away with that in an illegal dispensary, but I guarantee it's not happening at a licensed establishment, and the assumption is nothing more than age-old fear-mongering. Regarding the California Cannabis Track and Trace System, it is indeed online and operational. The system is called Metric, from Florida company Franwell. The state issued temporary licenses in late 2017. Those temporary licenses are not required to use the Metric system, but when they are issued their annual licenses, they must use the state track and trace system, requiring all new inventory to be obtained from state licensed operators. Temporary licenses are valid for 120 days, at which time the operator must have submitted an application for an annual license. By the time Oceanside has approved an ordinance, created applications, and approved its first license, the state's track and trace system will be well underway and used by all annual license holders. I urge this council to perform its duties of listening and working for its residents and not be influenced by outside interests, whether that be overzealous parents, regurgitating government propaganda, or dispensary owners looking to buy their way into the city. Thank you for your time.
The next speaker is Cindy Broco.
Honorable Mayor, council members, I promise this is my last up at the podium. I want to talk about something that's going to be proposed by Councilmember Lowry and Councilmember Kern regarding a electronic message board out in front of the Civic Center Plaza to replace the banners that we're currently using to communicate city events. Basically, no matter what you call it, whether it's electronic message, LED, LCD, and digital signs, they're all one and the same. And the FEMA sign that was presented as an example is actually very, very unnecessary given the way that information is currently being communicated through cell phones, etc. I think it's with FEMA, I know that there's an independent software, so it is actually created, the images and messages are created through a software, so there's no manual effort there, which opens the door for potential flashing in digital and colored messages. I know this is, I think, approximately 40 inches by maybe 70 inches. And I know that it's going to be explored and you're looking at alternatives, but I think the key thing is to look at it and say, why? What is the purpose truly of doing this? What are we trying to solve? Now I hear part of it is the safety issues with hanging banners, which we've been doing. I know that was one of the examples of what had come up. And regardless, I even walked across the street with some tourists that were visiting, and I said, oh, what do you think about those banners over there? And they're like, what? So they're not even really looking at them. So I say, is there other alternatives to explore for communicating city events or different things that are going on? And one of them would be, instead of having the digital sign, which sets a blight precedent and also makes us susceptible to further lawsuits by others that choose to follow, is to do, for example, a glass enclosed display case outside the library with events, where, like at a school, where they would manage the marketing brochures. Also, to set up, have it like a marquee where they go in and manually can change letters as if it's a theater or a gas station. And then the other thing, which I think should be actually explored, which is more viable, is to set up a kiosk for the public and tourists to use. So, for example, you have a kiosk that might be shorter or narrower than this, but you set it up at key locations, such as the entry to the pier or in that proximity, or in front of the Regal Theater, which is a very highly trafficked area. I just think even the banners are not the greatest idea, and I definitely do not agree with any sort of digital or electronic signs. Thank you. Also, it is inconsistent with the decisions that have been made by this council, and I think that really opens up the door for possibly another lawsuit by the individuals that wanted to do it on the highways. Thank you.
And the last speaker is Michelle McKelnick. Sorry if I mispronounced her last name.
Been butchered for years. Hi, everyone. Thank you. My name is Michelle McKechnie. I'm the co-operator of 420 Central Delivery here in Oceanside. I come before you to ask you once again in 2 weeks, you will be having the ordinance that the ad hoc committee has worked so diligently for come up front for you to vote on it, and I ask you that you please do vote yes for it. I come to talk to you about a couple of the benefits that we've seen. I work in Santa Ana. That's how we got the license here in Oceanside for the delivery. And I just wanted to talk about some of the benefits that we've seen over the last couple of years and that hopefully Oceanside will be able to see as well. So first off, we talk about the financial benefits. Obviously, there's going to be taxes involved. Right now, the ordinance does not allow for any extra tax to be collected, but there will be a 15% state excise tax that will be included, and that 15% excise tax does get shared with the cities that do adopt these ordinances. It is to help with enforcement. It is to help with making sure that other black market, or what we sometimes call clandestine stores, are shut down, that they play by the rules, because the goal is, ladies and gentlemen, that we do have a system that is well regulated, so that there aren't people getting cartridges that have more pesticides than any other state. When the full regulations is up and running, which is going to be in July of this year, there is a transitional period, obviously. Like any regulation or any new system, we have to have that transitional period, and that's where we are right now. Every licensed store that is on board right now is getting in place and is moving towards that, which means all products must be come in prepackaged. There's no more prepackaging in stores. It all has to be labeled with a sticker saying exactly where it was grown, who grew it, what distributor it came from. It all can be traced through the system. We also have to have a system that is interchangeable with the states. So not that we have to adopt metric, but we have to have a system that can join up with it, that can be used with it, because they have to be able to track us. They have to see exactly where our sales are. They have to know if somebody's coming in and getting more than the 28 ounces or 28 grams a day that they're allowed. And so we all have to be interconnected. We also talk about the jobs that are going to be created. Hundreds of jobs, ladies and gentlemen. Hundreds of jobs that pay very well. When we're talking about this is going to be a labor-enforced industry, which means people are going to be paid very well. And what are they going to do with those incomes? They're going to buy houses here in Oceanside. They're going to invest in other businesses. They're going to shop at our restaurants. They're going to shop at our stores. They're going to bring in. And we're also talking about, when we talk about the retail, which is my specialty, you're going to have customers coming in that are going to be stopping at the stores and bringing more revenue for the city of Oceanside. When we look at the community benefits, we also know, and I got 20 seconds, so I'm going to be fast, most of the stores are going to be located in industrial areas that have high homeless rates. Our goal, ladies and gentlemen, is to attract customers. They don't want to have to step over homeless as well. So we have to work with the city to try to help these situations, try to eradicate some of the problems that we're going to face as well, not only as a city, but as a personal business. So again, I please ask you to vote yes in 2 weeks to pass the ordinance. Thank you, and have a great night. That's it for the speakers.
We'll take a short break and come back in 5 minutes.
With Curb Up, Oceanside residents can call Waste Management to arrange for a free curbside pickup of their large items. For items suitable for donation, Waste Management offers 2 donation weeks per year. Residents can schedule a curbside pickup of up to 8 generally used large items, household goods, or textiles. After scheduling their pickup, residents place items curbside for donation. For items headed to the landfill, Waste Management offers 2 landfill weeks per year. Residents can schedule their free curbside pickup by calling Waste Management prior to landfill week. In addition to landfill weeks, each Oceanside resident may schedule an additional 3 landfill curbside pickups of up to 5 large items annually. To schedule your free curbside donation or landfill pickup, call Waste Management at 439-2824 at least 24 hours in advance of your regularly scheduled service day. For more information on trash and recycling services at Oceanside and all of the city's environmental programs, please visit greenoceanside.org.
Does your child need help with homework or reading? The Oceanside Public Library offers free programs and services to help your child succeed in school. The library's Homework Helpers program offers homework assistance provided by volunteers for students in grades kindergarten through 8. Homework Helpers is offered at the Mission Branch Library on Mondays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. and on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at the Civic Center Library from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. Book Buddies pairs teen volunteers with children to help them with their literacy skills and to develop a lifelong love of reading. Book Buddies is available at the Civic Center Library on Mondays and Thursdays from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. and at the Mission Branch Library on Tuesdays and Wednesdays from 3:30 to 5:30 p.m. No advanced registration or sign-up is required for either of these free programs, which run throughout the school year. Students with an Oceanside Public Library card also have free access to computers in the library and online homework help resources through the library's website. The library is always looking for volunteers to help with these programs. If you're interested in volunteering as a homework helper, please call Sherry Noel, Volunteer Coordinator, area code 760-435-5560. If you're a teen interested in volunteering for Book Buddies, please call Amy Clayman, Teen Services Librarian, at 760-435-5583. If you'd like more information on Homework Helpers, Book Buddies, or any other library program, please call 760-435-5600 or visit our website at oceansidepubliclibrary.org.
The Oceanside Police Department's Senior Volunteer Patrol Program is designed for senior citizens 50 years and older who wish to serve the community while working in partnership with police to promote public safety and service programs. Consider joining our team. Senior Volunteer Patrol members provide many services to the community, such as assisting with traffic control, performing vacation home checks, and conducting You Are Not Alone visits to the homebound. Volunteer patrol members can be seen patrolling the shopping centers, schools, and parks. Senior patrol members also assist the police with traffic safety checkpoints. They provide security at crime scene perimeters, accidents, and blocked roadways. Senior volunteer patrol members have the option of performing administrative duties or patrol duties. For safety purposes, volunteer patrol duties do not place volunteers in a confrontational situation. Patrol duties enable the volunteers to serve as the eyes and ears of the department. They are equipped with radios and are always able to communicate with police officers. The Oceanside Police Department first formed the Senior Volunteer Program in 1995. The program has grown steadily and has a team of over 65 multi-talented members. Volunteers find the work pleasant and rewarding. Participants are required to be at least 50 years old with a valid driver's license. Uniforms are provided, and members are asked to try to commit to work 6.5 hours a week. If you are interested in finding out more, please call us at 760-435-4763. To sign up to volunteer, fill out an application on the city's website under the Human Resources tab, or pick one up at the Oceanside Police Department at 3855 Mission Avenue. We look forward to meeting you, and give us a wave as you see us patrolling in Oceanside. Thank you.
We're going to go to item 15, which is an introduction of an ordinance establishing citywide regulations for nonconforming uses and structures.
This is a public hearing, right?
Yes, this is a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. And disclosures?
I've just spoken with staff.
Staff.
No contact.
Staff only.
Do we have any?
No, would anyone wish No material has been.
Amy?
Good evening, our mayor and members of the city council. No PowerPoint presentation this evening. The proposal under consideration, zoning text amendment 1607 and local coastal plan amendment 1604, is part of the ongoing effort to consolidate the city's multiple zoning ordinances under a single document and involves the following: repeal of Article 18 of the 1986 zoning ordinance provisions regulating non-conforming uses and structures on properties within the coastal zone, and 2, zoning text amendments to Articles 27 and 35 of the 92 zoning ordinance, which set forth standards and procedures for the establishment of non-conforming use amortization overlay districts and regulations of non-conforming uses and structures, respectively. As proposed as part of the LCPA before you this evening, upon certification of the amended Articles 27 and 35 by the Coastal Commission, the updated regulations will be applicable citywide. With regard to the specific text amendments, staff proposes 1, non-substantive modifications to Article 27 of the 92 zoning ordinance, limited to formatting. Provisions of the article allow, under certain circumstances, the establishment of an amortization overlay district for non-conforming uses for the purpose of reducing blight and long-term vacancies. And 2, text modifications to Article 35, provisions pertaining to non-conforming uses and structures that would be updated to address Government Code Section 65852.25, which allows for the reconstruction, restoration, or rebuilding of multiple family dwellings damaged by fire or catastrophic events by more than 50%. And 2, we are including a carryover provision per coastal staff recommendation from the 96 zoning ordinance, which establishes that any expansion, change, or enlargement or intensification of any use or the addition of a new use on a property not specifically named or described in a resolution establishing an abatement period would trigger termination of a non-conforming status. Staff is recommending that the City Council introduce an ordinance repealing Article 18 of the 1986 zoning ordinance, modifying Articles 27 and 35 of the 92 zoning ordinance, and establishing the amended text as part of the city's comprehensive zoning ordinance, and adopt a resolution requesting California Coastal Commission certification of an amendment to the implementation plan as stated in LCPA 1604 of the local coastal program, establishing the amended zoning ordinance text of Articles 27 and 35 as part of the city's LCPA. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Would anyone from the public wish to speak on this item?
Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Kern.
I move introduction of an ordinance and adoption of resolution repealing and amending certain articles of the 1986 and the 1992 zoning ordinances.
Mr. Bowman?
Okay, if the council's ready to vote, I'll title the ordinance. This is the introduction of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oceanside repealing Article 18 of the 1986 zoning ordinance, amending Articles 27 and 35 of the comprehensive zoning ordinance, and establishing the amended articles as part of the implementation plan of the local coastal program.
Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
Go to item 16, which is introduction of an ordinance regarding the zoning ordinance and wireless communication facilities. I will open this public hearing and request disclosures from the council.
Staff only.
Staff.
Staff, and we received some letters from the wireless industry.
So did I.
Other than those emails, no other public communications.
Staff, and I didn't receive the copies of the emails.
We have any correspondence, sir?
No additional correspondence.
Good evening again. Zoning regulations for the establishment and operation of communication facilities are currently addressed in Articles 39 and 39A of the 1986 and the 1992 zoning ordinance. These articles were adopted by the city in November of 2012 and satisfied at that time federal and state laws However, new rules, particularly those pertaining to non-substantive modifications to wireless communications facilities, prompted the city to initiate a zoning text amendment last year to update those existing ordinances. The city hired a consultant with vast experience in the field of telecommunications regulations, the telecom law firm, to work with the staff in updating the current ordinance. And our consultant is here this evening to present the draft ordinance and answer any questions you may have along with city staff. With that, I'll turn it over to Trip May to start the presentation.
Yeah, do we know how to? Perfect, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Trip May. I'm a partner at Telecom Law Firm, and I am your consultant. By way of background, our firm has represented over 600 local government agencies around the country, primarily here in California. We've worked extensively with the League of California Cities and represented the League of Oregon Cities, New Mexico, and Arizona in front of the FCC on regulatory matters. So we're pretty in on the wireless regulations, and we've been working closely with staff to help update the ordinance for big changes in not just the technology, but in the law. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of the project, talk about some of the big changes that are occurring in the law that have already happened and that may be on the horizon, and then go through how we've addressed that in the ordinance. So, to give you a sense about how much time has gone into this, we've been working on it since well before September 2017, almost a year. But that's when the ordinance was released for public comment. There was a workshop held. We've taken comments from residents. We've taken comments from the industry. We've made amendments in response to those. We received a recommendation from the Planning Commission, and tonight we're here to present it to you. So, just to give you a little bit of background so we can set the table, the primary body of law for wireless regulations at the federal level is the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And the provisions that affect zoning authority are in this section, Section 332C7. It generally preserves all of your traditional authority with some exceptions. So there are 3 substantive limitations and 2 procedural. The substantive ones are that you can't prohibit wireless services and you can't effectively prohibit those wireless services. This means that if there is a need, a significant gap in a carrier's coverage, then they have to be permitted to close that through what they call the least intrusive means. Basically, the facility that is either compliant with your code or the least non-compliant with the provisions of your code that would be a basis for denial. The ordinance has a detailed process for how we go about determining whether a denial for a non-compliant facility warrants some kind of an exception for the compliance with this particular provision. Second substantive limitation is you can't unreasonably discriminate against functionally equivalent carriers. It's pretty simple. It's treat like and like alike. And the third is that you cannot regulate on the basis of the environmental effects of radio frequency emissions to the extent that those emissions are compliant with the FCC's rules. The FCC has sole authority over setting what those guidelines are, and local governments, state governments can check for compliance with the rules, but once the facility has been determined to be compliant, your ability to regulate it on the basis of radio frequency emissions or their environmental effects is at an end. Procedurally, all wireless facilities applications have to be acted on within a reasonable period of time. The FCC has very complex rules for how we go about processing these applications within preset timeframes. And we'll talk about what those are and how California law modifies them as we go forward. And then all denials have to be in writing, based on substantial evidence in the record. And substantial evidence is your traditional standard. In writing means not just that you write down yes or no, but it also means you include the reasons for the denial. So we've got provisions in the ordinance that make sure that we take care of that requirement. One thing I want to point out here is that the bottom bullet point about substantial evidence is familiar to most decision-making bodies at the local government level. What's different about this particular context is that it's not enough to have substantial evidence. You have to have substantial evidence, and then you have to not violate any of those other three substantive limitations. So, put another way, even if you have substantial evidence to deny an application, if one of your reasons is the denial on the basis of radio frequency emissions, then your denial may not be upheld if it's challenged in court. Likewise, if you have substantial evidence, but the denial is an effective prohibition because they have to have a site somewhere to be able to complete their coverage, then the denial will not be upheld if it's challenged in court. So you're running through a checklist here. Since you've last amended your ordinance, there's been a couple of major changes. The first one is this one. 2012, the Congress passed the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012, which was essentially a Christmas tree with everybody hung an ornament on. This was one of the ornaments. And it says in a paraphrased way that state and local governments may not deny and shall approve any co-location or modification to existing wireless towers or base stations if the changes don't result in a substantial change in the physical dimensions. The statute's only 140 some odd words long. The FCC has about 200 paragraphs of regulations describing how this goes, and the ordinance has a separate section that handles the processing at the local level for these types of applications. What you need to know here is that there is a box that's been established by the FCC with respect to the substantial change dimensions. It's an invisible box that's based on height, width, number of equipment cabinets being added, excavation outside of the footprint of the site. But if the project fits within that box, it has to be approved. And if you don't do it within 60 days, which is the reasonable time established by the FCC, it's deemed granted by the operation of law. So the ordinance also addresses how do we process these applications quickly in a way that doesn't leave us in a situation of having something deemed granted. It also has other provisions in there that protect the city in case something is deemed granted, and we will talk about how those work in a few moments. A related statute in California law, the government code, is section 65964.1, which deems granted all other wireless applications if the city fails to act within the reasonable time frames set out by the FCC. So for non-6409 projects, everything else, it's 150 days or 90 days if it's a co-location that doesn't qualify for 6409 approval. What happens after a deemed approval? Nobody really understands. The law doesn't define it very well, and so part of what we've done with the ordinance is lay out a roadmap for protecting the city, like I mentioned before, but also dealing with those types of projects and making sure that we have adequate notice in order to make decisions in time to avoid the deemed granted altogether. So, as an overview of these amendments, we needed to comply with the law, and we also wanted to build in flexibility for future changes. So, to give you an idea about what that means, the FCC has 3 open proceedings to reinterpret a lot of the different provisions in the Telecom Act. We did have SB 649 pending in California, but it was vetoed by the governor. 17 other states have adopted similar statutes to SB 649, which would have made a special class of wireless facilities ministerial only, and the FCC is also considering similar types of rules for those types of facilities. And there's even a draft bill floating around in the Senate to rewrite the Telecom Act. So we've made changes to the ordinance to build in some flexibility. When requirements change, when procedural rules change, we have the ability to go back and adjust without necessarily doing a whole another ordinance amendment. We've separated the ordinance into 2 different sections, basically section 6409 projects in one and everything else in another. The idea there is that the rules are partially overlapping because all the provisions that are applicable to normal projects are also applicable to 6409. But 6409 projects have a shorter time frame, different restrictions on what you can and cannot require as part of a complete application and other things. So we've separated them for ease. We've also created incentives to build projects that the city likes to see. So as you'll see in the ordinance, we have administrative approvals for fully stealth facilities in preferred locations that you can't see as even hiding a wireless facility. Examples would be putting something inside of a bell tower. The antennas are totally hidden; they're not external. If there's no change to the visible facade of the building, that's something that staff could handle. But if the project is in a residential area or if it's unconcealed, it goes through a more rigorous review process through the Planning Commission. And we also have a specific limited exception for compliance with federal and state laws. So if there's ever an instance where strict compliance with the ordinance would create a conflict with federal or state law, there are specific findings that either the Planning Commission can make to grant a narrow exception needed for compliance. Following slides give you a kind of a compare and contrast. Like I mentioned, we've streamlined the administrative CUP process to include things that the city wants to see and then placed everything else in the traditional CUP process. We've created a separate approval for 6409. We have deleted the application requirements because under the federal law, it doesn't have to be codified, and because what you can and cannot require for certain applications is constantly shifting, we've shifted that responsibility to staff to produce applications. That way we don't have to go through this process just to change an application. We've given specific facility development standards, and we've created those specific exceptions for compliance with law. So staff's recommendation is to introduce the ordinance and adopt a resolution requesting the Coastal Commission certification. And I'm available for any questions.
Brief question. On the previous slide that you had up there, you said deleted. Did you?
It is, so the prior ordinance had a list of application requirements. We have deleted that list and then delegated authority to staff to create it.
Maybe I was reading wrong. But
that's okay. Thanks.
We have two speakers. The first speaker is Jimmy Nall.
I think that's Jimmy Knott.
Correct.
Okay. Jimmy Knott, 127 Sherry Lane. And as many of you know, I sat on the Telecommunications Committee for over 15 years and helped establish the ordinance. And we had about a year and a half public input onto that, and we had input from a lot of professionals and from our legal department extensively. We met with them a number of times. And according to what we were told, it was groundbreaking in what we did with what we presented to the public and what was approved. There are three issues that I have and two definitions that need to be included so the public can better understand. The two definitions are at 30906C, and that is FCC shot clock. That needs to be defined. It's insider code language. The public will look at that and say, what the heck does that mean? And I think that if it was better defined, public could understand when reading through what's being said. Also a legal term, and 3907D, de novo public hearing. I know what it means, but it would be better if it was defined in the definition area. The three issues are very simple. One, cumulative strength on boosting power strength can overload RF signals, and it can cause, very simple, cooking of a developed or injuring brain, depending upon the closeness of one to that signal. And you cannot regulate it, the RF, but you can regulate the distance and the spaces of the buildings. So that's one thing that you can do. 2, security questions. You need on-site contact information in case of issues. There have been issues in the past, and in the future, I don't need to go into those. And you have also in 3913, if you look at it, there should be a graduated scale instead of a blanket scale. Because right now you jump, as an example, if you spend $50,000, it's 5 years, granted. But if you spend $50,000 and $1, you get 10 years. Same way with $500,000. If you spend $500,000, you get 10 years. If you spend $500,000 and $1, you get 15 years. That scale needs to be graduated so that it be fair for all. Thank you. That was brought to my attention by a member of the public.
Joe Parker and Jessica Antonatis.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the Council. My name is Joe Parker. I am counsel for Crown Castle, which is the nation's leading provider of shared wireless infrastructure. Along with me is my colleague Jessica Antonatis. I'm here on behalf of my client and the industry in general to address your draft ordinance. By way of history, I've represented Crown for the last 15, 16 years throughout California at various public agency levels. Crown Castle is not only a tenant of the city, but we maintain and operate multiple sites within your city. Mr. May and I work quite a bit together as we see each other, so it's no coincidence that we're both here tonight. And I will say that a compliment to the city as well as to Mr. May's office as well as staff that you've managed to move this project along with amazing speed. And there are many features of your ordinance that are favorable and appreciated by the wireless industry. However, we do have several areas that we feel that are necessary for discussion, and our approach is a suggested approach that has been followed by some of the other cities that are doing similar ordinance changes. For example, in the city of Irvine, the city voluntarily made available to the industry, to the public, as well as staff members and even the mayor's office, a series of targeted meetings where we were able to discuss many features of the ordinance, which either the telecom industry was asking that be revised or considered. We brought specific examples of sites that would be subject to the draft language and how that might prove to provide some practical problems down the road in terms of inputting the ordinance and following the letter of the law. And before you in your packet, and I understood that there were some questions about whether there was correspondence, you have a letter from in-house counsel at Crown which provides a very detailed analysis of your ordinance in areas where we think that there should be more discussion. I understand that American Tower has also issued a similar letter, surprisingly or not surprisingly, on the same issues. And of course, Verizon Wireless has done the same thing. And our request here tonight is that prior to adopting this resolution, that you consider a continuance of this hearing so that we may have the opportunity to have some meaningful discussions with staff. We are engaging in a very similar process right now with the County of San Diego. I will say that it has been very successful. Our goal is to work with you, not against you. Frankly, we're here because we appreciate and respect your local ordinance, and at the same time need to balance against that the need to deploy wireless infrastructure as part of the nation's national broadband directive. And to that end, I won't go into a lot of detail about specific legal issues, and I see that I'm out of time. May I have a few more minutes, or at least one more minute to address this?
Yeah, one more.
Thank you. But we have laid out in detail some of the issues. They relate to the amortization schedule, and we would like the opportunity to comment and speak about that. Your application and pre-application procedures that are proposed in there, and a few other items. And so my request is that the council consider a brief continuance of this hearing so that we may have that opportunity. My client has participated in the workshop. However, that is not really a replacement for the type of meaningful dialogue that's required when you can actually come down and sit in with staff and other members of the city feels is appropriate to have a meaningful dialogue to address this so that we can come to terms on something that works not only for you but for us. So thank you for your time. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Would anyone else from the public wish to speak at this time?
Close the public hearing. Councilmember Kern.
Thank you. These issues that were brought up, were these brought up during this whole process of writing these ordinances? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of little things that people are kind of picking apart. So I'm sure hopefully it's not the first time you heard of them.
They're not, and some of the issues were raised during the workshop, some of the issues were raised during the Planning Commission, and we did receive the letters either last week or this week. Some of the issues we responded to by making changes to the ordinance, and some of which we have a different opinion about what the law requires or permits, and so we have made decisions about accepting or not accepting certain comments.
Okay, so, all right, so that's good. I just want to make sure that we've covered all the bases and this is not new information to you, so you guys need to do that. I have a particular interest in 39A. You know, we about 4 or 5 years ago, we spent several months drafting 39A. I'm looking through it. I don't see any substantive changes. It's just renumbering and relettering. I just want to make sure that that is what's happening here and there's nothing in there other than what's already there.
There are more significant changes in the procedures, because the procedures are what's really changed. We've got some new noticing requirements that are tailored towards these deemed approvals, and we have standard conditions that have taken some of the maintenance and operational requirements of the old ordinance and made them automatic conditions of approval. But substantively, they're very similar.
Okay, Amy, looks like you want to push your button there.
Okay. He's talking about something else.
The current 39A, which pertains to the amateur radio type of facilities. Those have been wholesalely transferred into 39C. We have not made any changes to that.
There was a lot of brain damage to get to 39A a few years ago, and I just don't want to go through that one again. So, I'm sorry, what?
More than 2 years.
A few years ago. I'm getting old, but not that old. So, anyway, I got to commend staff not only on this item, but the other items that we're going through, and we're upgrading these ordinances and bringing everything together. I know it's been a heavy lift on your part to actually start merging all these ordinances from 92 and 96 and around just random ordinances and stuff. So I commended that. So I'm going to move the introduction of the ordinance adoption and resolution repealing and amending certain articles of 1986-92 ordinances, wireless communication facilities.
I'll second.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you. I believe our role is to maximize the public's health and safety with respect to these rules and laws, and to also maximize the City Council's discretion vis-a-vis the telecommunication industry. I think that is what I see our role is to listen to the public, to exercise as much discretion as we can under federal and state laws, and make sure that we have crossed every T and dotted every I with respect to that. So would you say that your recommendations basically address those kind of requirements?
Yes. So with respect to radio frequency emissions, we have done everything that the law allows the city to do and made that baked into the process.
Okay, because we hired you to represent the city's best interest and not certainly any one industry, right? So I did have some questions, Mr. May, sorry. Tripp is your first name, May is your last name, right? Could you please describe the comments at the public workshop? What were the concerns that the public generally had? We don't have a whole lot of public. Mr. Knott brought up some very good points, including a definition for shot clock time frame. But first, could you please kind of describe what the public's concerns were?
So Mr. Knott was there, and he raised some similar types of questions, wanted to know things about how this would work with other technologies. Crown Castle was there, and they didn't raise many comments. The primary one was related to amortization of existing non-conforming facilities over time.
Okay, so in terms of the public, and that is, I mean, I would also like to hear about the industry and what kind of concerns they had, but in terms of the public, which I think is the most important for me, that was basically it. They were not concerned about the lack of discretion by the city, or what kind of things would the city have discretion over?
The meeting wasn't as well attended as we would have liked.
How many people showed up?
I think we had maybe a dozen. And
a dozen?
And not very
12.
many questions, yeah.
Okay. With respect to the regulations, I know in the past we have tried to kind of point certain companies to like piggyback on existing facilities. Is that something that we'll still be able to do?
Yes. So co-location is still favored. Existing structures are still favored.
Okay. What about preferred siting? Say there's a request for a siting, but the staff has, or the city has a preferred place for it, perhaps not near parks or schools or whatever. Is that something that the city would still have discretion over?
Yes, and there's a couple of different ways that you get after those issues. The first way is a more streamlined process for preferred locations in the first place, so avoiding the need to propose in those areas. And the second is a detailed process for finding what we call the least intrusive means. Basically, other sites that would fill their technical need and are available to them in better or more preferred locations.
Right. And does the city actually have a list of, say, top certain locations, and is that something available online?
Specific addresses? No.
Specific sites?
Specific zones or types of properties, yes. So there's a hierarchy, essentially, with commercial and industrial sites at the top and residential open space sites near the bottom.
Right, okay. For example, in earlier 2000s, I remember some residents would come up with like a chimney or something kind of situation, and trying to get it on private, like say a residence. And now we've moved away from that completely. Is that basically true?
So it is not prohibited to site on residential properties. It is strongly discouraged as a last resort.
Okay. Okay, so how big is the invisible box, and could you please describe what that is?
Sure. So the FCC has what they call an objective factors threshold test for what a substantial change is, and it depends on whether the structure is a tower, so freestanding purpose-built structure, or what they call a base station, which is a non-tower, like a building that has an equipment just installed on it. For towers, they can get 10% or 20 feet taller, whichever is greater. They can get 20 feet wider, or the width of the tower at the level of the appurtenance, whichever is greater. Add 4 equipment cabinets per modification, and they can excavate and deploy new equipment on the ground so long as it's within their leasehold or their, basically the site footprint of the area. But they can't defeat the concealment that is existing on the site, and they have to comply with all of the conditions of approval, unless those conditions relate to height, width, equipment cabinets, or excavation. For base stations, so buildings or facilities that are in the right-of-way, it's 10 feet or 10%, whichever is greater for increases in height. 6 feet wider, up to 4 equipment cabinets, but no new cabinets on the ground if there aren't any equipment cabinets on the ground, and some other volumetric rules that are a little complicated. And then again, the same excavation limits and restrictions on defeating the concealment elements. Some general rules are, if any portion of the project is not compliant with any health or safety codes, the statute doesn't apply. And if the whole support structure needs to be replaced in order to be structurally sound with the amount of equipment they want to add, then it goes back through a discretionary process. That doesn't fit in the box either. There is a cumulative height limit. Essentially, it is those limits I described. They can go up 20 feet or 10.
The concealment, as you said.
Yes.
Okay.
But there is a cumulative height limit on how high they can go.
And that is consistent with, say, the city's height limits?
No. So these rules preempt subjective aesthetic rules. So if it fits within the box and doesn't defeat the concealment, you don't have discretion to require them to add new concealment or to change the way the facility looks. You have to approve it. If it violates the zone height limit because their increase in height is going to
You mean like
up.
10 feet?
Yeah. If 10 feet taller would violate your zone height limit, you have to approve it. It's preempted. And if it's a legal non-conforming use, you can't bring it back into the process to have it brought up to date with the most recent code. You have to approve that modification as it's proposed. You can only bring it back.
You mean in terms of the concealment, if it's non-conforming,
right.
You can't make them conform. Say it's, what about dilapidated or, kind of aging kind of material, eyesore type of thing? Is that something that we could require?
So code enforcement is still available to you.
Okay.
Right. But subjective aesthetic requirements for just approving a facility permit application, not available to you. If it's unsafe, then of course you can deny it on that basis. And if it doesn't have a permit, like say it's been modified without getting prior approval, or there was never approval in the first place, those facilities are not included within the scope of this statute.
And they have to come to us, even though a lot of the stuff seems to be almost pre-approved, and they still have to let us know. They still have to go through a process, expedited as it is, and we still have the opportunity to provide all that information to the public.
That's right. So the FCC tells you what you need to do, not how you need to do it. We've laid out a process that we think works best based on experiences around the state, and it does involve receiving information from the applicant that can be made public.
And in terms of cumulative emissions, there is a maximum, right? I mean, you can't just keep adding and piggybacking and growing, another 10 feet. There is a maximum of emissions, right?
There is a maximum of exposure. So the FCC regulates how much exposure a person can receive, not necessarily how powerful the antennas can be, and that works on a sliding scale, right? So if an antenna is close to where people are, they have to turn the power down in order to avoid breaking that exposure limit. There is a maximum on exposure, and it applies to cumulative emitters as well. So we don't measure the antennas, we measure the space. If there are multiple antennas from different providers all emitting into a particular area, we would have to evaluate all of those emitters, not just whoever the applicant is.
Okay. And one final question. Sorry about all the questions. Your presentation brought up a lot of questions in my mind. What is the definition of the FCC shot clock time frame? What is that?
So I'm glad you asked that, because there's a specific reason why it wasn't defined in the ordinance, and that's because it keeps changing. The FCC shot clock is shorthand for the FCC's system of procedural rules on how long you can process applications for. Right now, it is 90 days for large co-locations not subject to 6409, 150 days for new sites, and 60 days for
existing.
Yeah, the modifications under 6409. There are rules about how you process and complete applications that are involved in the shot clock, and there are, as I mentioned, FCC proceedings to shorten all of these, including things basically stepping down a level. 150 go to 90, 90 goes to 60, 60 might go to 45. So in order.
And what's the notification period? You know, getting everyone to know, the city, the public, in terms of the changes in this timing.
So you mean the notification period from the FCC or from the city?
The shot clock time frame that is, I guess, required of us.
So
you said it's going to be changing, or you anticipate it's going to be changing over time. And right now, you've given us what it is now.
Mm-hmm. So right now, the FCC has an open proceeding with proposed rules to change. So they could take this up at any time. It's not on their March agenda. It might be in April or May. And if they adopt a new rule, it is effective 30 days from publication in the Federal Register. So that could be maybe 45, depending on editorial changes after the adoption of the rule. We would obviously let staff know that there's a change about to happen,
right.
and we could publicize it that way, but the FCC just announces it in their public meetings.
Okay. So is there somebody at staff that's responsible for getting this information? Would it be the planning director?
Mayor and council members, the planning division commonly gets notice of rulemaking from all levels of government.
Okay, thank you.
My office gets them as well. So.
Okay. Well, we're relying on you. Okay, well, I go back to my initial statement, which is that my concern is ensuring that we maximize the public's health and safety and maximize the city council's discretion as much as we can, I guess, vis-a-vis the FCC and the telecommunications industry. So I'm hearing that our consultant and staff feels that we have accomplished that. Is that right?
Yes.
And staff, you agree with that statement?
Mayor and council members, discretion by council. The way the application works now is the CUP would be reviewed by the planning commission. So
city council, the city.
You're talking collectively, the city.
Yes.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Lowry. Thank you. So what you've been explaining to us is that the FCC, which is the Federal Communications Commission, has regulations in place that we have to comply with, and that's why you're here, and that's what you're explaining to us. Is that correct? Just to kind of get it in a single sentence question.
Yep, FCC and state government, state statutes.
And what is it that the city actually can do if we don't like what they're telling us? Isn't the answer to that nothing?
No. So, you mean the FCC or the applicant?
FCC.
Okay. So you can participate in the notice and comment process. We represent the league in many of these processes. You can sue the FCC and seek judicial review.
Sue the Fed.
Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the way the administrative process works. It is, and there's a very deferential standard of review for agency decision making. So, it's an uphill battle.
I understand that. So if an individual shares the concern that I have about exposure to radio frequencies, are there any resources available for people who might want to take steps in their own personal lives to reduce their exposure because it's pervasive?
So there are consultants who...
Wait a minute, I mean like websites.
Websites.
That the consumer can go to. Yeah, not hire a consultant.
I believe so. It's hard to trust what you read on the internet.
Yeah.
But environmental groups, peer-reviewed studies, they have information about how you can limit your exposure, particularly to devices, and not just antennas on towers.
Like cell phones and tablets and et cetera.
Yeah, because they all emit as well, and they're much closer to the body.
So if someone is concerned about their personal exposure, they should go online and start with the agencies like the Federal Communications Commission, or what's the name of the state agency?
So there is a great guide. It's called the Local Government's Guide to Radio Frequency Compliance Evaluation. It's a long government title. My partner, Jonathan Kramer, at the telecom law firm, helped to draft it. The FCC published it. And it was a product of the Intergovernmental Advisory Agency, which is a committee underneath the FCC. That document talks about how you evaluate and what the FCC rules are and steps that you can take to make sure that you are, or that the facilities are in compliance.
And is this suitable for consumers who are concerned, this material?
So if you're talking about consumers who are concerned, I think you can look at the manual. The FCC requires that every device that is sold that has a transmitter in it has instructions about limiting your exposure. So if you have those manuals, you can find them, or you can go online and look at those as well.
Okay. So is there a resource, like a single-page resource or something that you can send to the City Council that we can refer our residents to if they want to do their homework and find out what they can do?
Yes, if the council would like us to vet websites for accurate information and provide some links, we would be happy to do that.
That would be great. Yeah, if you just send it to the City Council address or to mine if no one else wants it.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
This is the introduction of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oceanside repealing Articles 39 and 39A of the 1986 zoning ordinance, amending Articles 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 30, 39A, and 41C, and adding Article 39A/B to the comprehensive zoning ordinance and establishing the amended text of Articles 12, 15, 39A, B, C, and 41C as part of the implementation plan of the local coastal program.
Motion passes 5-0.
By any chance, did we just find out how sausage was made and all of this?
Go to item 17, which is ordinance regarding backflow prevention devices and termination of water service for noncompliance.
Could you change the screen?
I can work with this.
Thanks.
We have three disclosures. What we do?
To open the public hearing and request disclosures from the council.
Staff only.
Staff.
Staff.
No public communications.
Staff only.
Do you have any petition?
No additional.
Well, Robert.
Honorable Mayor, council members, Robert Gutierrez, Water Utilities Division Manager. I will be talking tonight, short presentation about amending Chapter 37 of the Oceanside City Code. Staff recommends that the City Council introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 37 of the City Code regarding cross-connection control and backflow prevention to require web-based data entry of backflow prevention device test results and to authorize termination of water service for noncompliance. The background to this program and ordinance essentially is backflow prevention devices are used to protect the potable water supplies from contamination due to backflow. We currently have over 3,600 of these devices in the city, and they're required to be tested annually. Test results and data entry are currently completed by one employee manually. And essentially what that means is those paper forms are mailed in to one employee and they manually enter them into the computer program. So it's very labor intensive. In these pictures, these are some of the most common devices you'll see around the city. So if you've ever wondered when you're driving around the city, you're walking up to a business and you see these devices out here, this is exactly what we're talking about. They range in different sizes from a 3/4 inch all the way up to a 6 or 8 inch. In September of 2014, water utility staff began working with backflow testers
on a voluntary basis in regards to web-based data entry. We essentially had two different meetings with these testers. We asked them to come in, we introduced this web-based data entry program, and we asked them to voluntarily start using this program instead of sending their tickets into us. So far, in the last 4 years, just voluntary alone, we've had 75% success rate with these testers, which is really great. They've been very positive in changing to this matter, and I think it may have coincided with the iPads coming to market. They've used those in the field quite a bit and makes their job a lot easier. Part of this is we are going to change some of the language in including termination of water service due to potential contamination health hazards. In the old ordinance, we did not have a method if the business owner did not comply to force them to comply. So our main goal in the Water Utilities Department is to protect the water system. What these backflow preventers do is they prohibit any water that's inside the pipes on a private property from coming back into our water lines. So, for instance, we have a water main break, the water line goes to zero, we open up some hydrants to drain the line out so we can fix it. We don't want any water coming from private property into our water line. A great example of that is a fire sprinkler system for City Hall where we have 3 stories. So the backflow preventers keep that fire sprinkler system from draining back into our water line and possibly contaminating it. Another really excellent thing as part of doing this web-based data entry is that it will move us closer to the goal of 75%, 90% diversion recycling rate as set forth by the council by the year 2020. So we are losing a lot of hard paperwork that we normally would have to keep. So it's a win-win for everybody involved. There is actually no fiscal impact to this. The software is already in use. The licensing fee is already included in our operating budget and has been there for several years now. Staff recommends that City Council introduce an ordinance amending Chapter 37 of the City Code requiring cross-connection control and backflow prevention to require web-based data entry of backflow prevention devices, test results, and to authorize termination of water service for noncompliance. That concludes my presentation, and I'm available for any questions.
Would anyone from the public wish to speak at this time? We have one speaker, Jimmy Hall.
Not. As in the Berry Farm. You do a little bit better. Jimmy Knott, 127 Cherry Lane. After reading this and also having served on the Utilities Commission, I fully endorse this for its health considerations for the public. Thank you.
Seeing no one else, we'll close the public hearing. Councilmember Sanchez.
Yes, thank you. One of the questions I had was, in 2015, you said you did this voluntarily, you got 75% to comply, right? And one of the question I have is, so this is from a piece of machinery to another piece of machinery. In other words, you do not have to do any kind of random testing to see if there's anything that's somehow being falsified, right? Or not, making up some kind of data.
Correct. So basically what the testers are doing, Councilmember Sanchez, is the testing form that they used to fill out, we basically transcribe that into an electronic format. So once they fill that out on the iPad, it sends it electronically to our computer system, and we can look at it. We also get email notification. But what happens is there's some algorithms in there that quickly will determine if there's any kind of
fudging on the data?
Of fudging. So you can fudge if you write it down on a piece of paper, but now we have that ability to quickly look at it, and there's some anomalies that may stick out that these numbers aren't matching up when they're doing the testing, and we'll get an email. You may want to look at this submittal and see if there's anything going on.
Right,
with it.
so although you don't have random testing per se, what you have are parameters that if it doesn't fit within that parameter, it brings up some possible questions, and then you double check with that the person who's providing that information.
Correct.
Okay.
And these backflow testers are licensed and certified by the state of California, so
Right.
there's an onus on them to be judicious in what they're doing so they don't lose their certification and possibly business in the future.
Of course, yeah. I go ahead and move introduction. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lowry.
Thank you. Robert, I have a question about your presentation in general. Could you have made it a little bit less complicated? Because when you explain something to us and you have pictures and you have, single syllable words, it really does make it easy for us to understand what you're telling us. But my real question is, are all of these at commercial industrial business locations? Some of them are outside housing areas, or the whole city has these?
Councilmember Lowry, there's a funny anecdote I'll tell you offline about the presentation, but there are some at homes. So several years ago, when model homes were developed, for some reason the developers put backflows in. The models get sold to homeowners, they buy them, now they have a backflow in front of their house that they have to test. That's not normally what backflows are used for. They're used for industrial, commercial, because you're not necessarily sure what may be going on site. It's fair to say that there may not be too much nefarious activity going on inside of a house that could create a hazard. It's going to be in that commercial type development areas.
So the real reason for having this is not, in addition to having it set up so that our water supply doesn't become contaminated or potentially contaminated, is to keep the public safety on a very high level so that we don't have to worry about some business that's dumping whatever into their water system or using it as part of their regular production.
Correct. And it also applies to agriculture. So irrigation meters have these backflows. The farmers will inject chemicals into the line going into their private property. Well, if we had a main break and when they're in the process of injecting those chemicals, the pressure from their pump can push that water back into our water line.
Sure.
And these backflows will prevent that.
Okay. Well, I understand that now, and I have seen them all over town. They're everywhere.
Right.
So thank you for explaining
Welcome.
that. Thank you.
I'll second that motion. With that, please vote. Title it.
This is the introduction of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oceanside amending Chapter 37 of the Oceanside City Code by the repeal of Section 37.8 relating to cross-connection control and backflow prevention and the addition of Article 9.
Please vote.
Motion passes 5-0.
There's no mayor or council member items. Are there any general council member comments?
I just have one. 2 o'clock, library, community service room. Richard Letter is going to have a talk. It's put on by the Friends of the Oceanside Public Library. It's, 2 o'clock. It's for members of the Friends of the Library. It's free. If you're not a member, it's $5.
Before we adjourn,
I just want to say one thing. Happy St. Patrick's Day on Saturday. Be safe. Green beer, whatever. Be safe. Thank you.
Before we adjourn, I would like to end with a moment of silence for the memory of Harold Cutler. And
also on Saturday, his services.
Thank you. With that, we'll adjourn to a council workshop on 2 o'clock on Wednesday, March 21st for Planning Commission interviews.